Hey Fannies, it's Kelly Nagy here for Stamp Anything, and today we celebrate love, and this is the Love is in the Air Digi-Stamp available at stampanything.com, and I'm going to start with the skin. Using a light skin Copic blend, we will pull out our E04, and we will place the E04 in the corners where the hair and the helmet meet. We would expect the shadow to be cast here. E04 in a fair skin color blend can be a scary marker, so don't feel like you're out there alone if that's something you're concerned about. But do know that when you do take those kind of risks in those deeper colors, you get a big reward in the end because your colors are dramatic and make such a big difference in the depth and dimension that you can create and the visual tricks that come from taking those chances. I'm moving on to the E11, and I'm actually going over the 04 marker that was put down first. So we're going directly over the top as well as connecting the two cornered areas with the top of her forehead. I also am going to pull some of the color down with the E21, but I am not going to touch the E04 and E11 blend. I'm going to let those two mingle alone for a little bit because I don't want to desaturate and bleach out some of that nice depth of color that I was trying to achieve. So I go from where the white of the paper start, from where that blend ended, and then I go towards the center of her face a little bit, trying to kind of preserve that initial blend of the E04 and E11. I do go at the bottom of her chin with the E21 as well as some stippling in that small little bit of real estate on her neck and her little bit of her chest showing. We're going to move to E00, and this is going to be where we want to dampen that paper a little bit. We're going to go down the edges, but we're also going to want to preserve the whites of the eyes. So as you're mapping and you're going around, I use this marker to map out the eyes and give myself a little bit of, I guess, a map so that the whites of the eyes are preserved. And don't worry if you are heavy-handed or there's been some ink bleeding into the whites of the eyes. That is easily corrected with just a little bit of white gel pen. The E00 will be flicked pretty much towards the center of the face from all angles. I like to use this opportunity to moisten that paper a little bit and get those inks blending into that paper fiber. Now onto the cheeks. We pull out marker R20 and we'll start just halfway down by the eye, up in the eyelash area, I guess, where the artist drawn line is, and then flick towards the nose and mouth into the cheek area. And I'll do the same on the other side. And don't worry about any harsh lines at this time. We're only on our first pass. Typically on skin tones, I like to do 2, and that seems to be what most of us who color with the alcohol markers do 2 skin. It does lend to a nice blend. We are now pulling out the E000, and this is feathered over the R20 to get rid of any of the harsh lines, the line of demarcation that could be created from the pink onto the lighter marker and the lighter skin tone. We want to make sure that that's blended out nicely. So I'm taking my marker and going around from the hairline towards the center of the face, and I'm pulling the colors, the darker colors and pigments from the edge to the center of the face, and that's going to give you the illusion that there's dimension to her face and not just a flat piece of paper. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to repeat a second layer of all of the colors. I like to use from EO4 all the way through and even do the cheeks again, because as I go the second time, I'm correcting errors and anything that I don't like what it looks like. And if it's blotchy, if your markers are dry, you might want to make sure that you go and fill them up as you're working, because it's nice to get the skin tones are like the focal point most of the time of your images. And so if we can get the skin right, I think the rest just kind of follows. So here we are putting down our second layer of the EO4, and this time I'm not being nearly as cautious about leaving it on its own to mingle with E11. I want to be sure that the dark colors that I'm adding are staying fairly vibrant, so that even though they might look kind of harsh now, once we get all the other colors on the paper, you'll find that having that added pigmentation in those shadowed areas will make such a big difference in your final product. So here I'm stippling a little bit, doing light flicks, and pulling out some of that color towards the center of her face, just to give that extra dimension. Then we'll move on to the E21, and we're just following around her hairline, flicking in towards her nose, still being very careful to preserve the whites around her eyes. But remember, if you mapped out with the E00 earlier, you should be able to have a visual cue, and the assistance will allow you to keep those whites staying white. E00 is next. Of course, this is your opportunity to fill in any spots that may have been neglected on the first pass, and correct any errors or things that just aren't making you happy at the time. Just know that these markers can be very forgiving, and sometimes they can't be, but if you are coloring and you don't like what you see, you can continue working on it, and eventually you will get to where you want to be. So if you don't like it, you're not done. We just finished the R20 on our cheeks for the second time, and then the last marker in that blend is the 000, and we are putting the final touches on her skin. Voila! Looks like we have her skin complete. And now we move on to hair. And with the hair, I only chose 2 markers, E43 and E44. There's not much of her hair that's visible. It's all under that helmet. So you can get away with 2 color blend, I believe, on this one. And we start with the darkest, E44, and we go in sections. And we use the artist drawn lines, and we go in the different areas. So with hair, we start at the root and then at the end, and we meet in the middle. So you'll see that I've used the darker of the 2, E44, under her neckline, and then at the edge and the bottom of her hair, I'll flick back towards her neckline. And I also don't want to miss those little whisks of hair that are just coming out from underneath her helmet. Then we take the E43 and we go over all of it, and that will leave the light highlight. Some people like to leave it white, others like to color the lightest blend and not leave any white paper, so it's completely personal preference. I take the lightest color and I have gone over the entire hair with that. So you can actually color all of her hair with the E43 first and then add your shadows. It's all personal preference. There's no right or wrong. As long as you're having fun, you're doing it right. Next, we're going to color the propeller blades, and I chose 3 colors, YR24, YR21, and R22. We're going to start with YR24, and you're just going to flick from the center of the propeller to the edge, leaving the ends without color at this time. We're going to pull in some red with the R22, or at least red family. We want to put a little color on the tips of the propellers, and it's Valentine's and it's love, so we'll add some R22 to make those propellers pop off the page. And then we're going to finish that up with YR21 and blend the 2 together just a little bit. We're going to move on to the propeller hub. That's the front of the plane there. And I'm starting with N4. And I'm going from the outside edge towards the center because I want the illusion to be that this is a rounded object. I do the same thing for that little bitty round part that's holding the propellers. I bring N1 in to finish off that propeller hub, just leaving that little highlight there, and we've got to add a little of that N1 to the propellers too, because it just kind of ties that all in together. It's at this point when I realize that I want to draw a line to divide a little part of the plane and give it a different color, so it's like two-tone. So it doesn't matter what kind of mark you make or what you use to make the line, but if you want to, go ahead and draw a line right there. And we're going to do the same color combo that we used for the propeller hub for that part of the plane. I just think it breaks it up a little bit. So I take the N4, and where the little rudder or whatever part that is meeting, I would think would have more of a shadow, plus the edge there, I want to give a little bit of a shadow because it gives it a rounded look, but I also want to, anywhere that two pieces are meeting or laying on top of each other, I would expect it to be darker and have a shadow cast. So that's where and how I map out where my colors are going to be placed. So I just continue on here with the N1 until I get that color in completely. Now on to coloring the banner. And what I do here while we have our N markers out, I had to play around with all these things since it is one of my first videos made. And we are going to use the N4, N1, and C0 to color the banner that is being pulled behind the plane. And the N4, I'm just following the curvature of the line of the banner and just kind of making a wispy line. Not necessarily solid, barely touching the paper, just giving it a little additional color. And I'm going to then take the N1 and go directly on top of it and pull out some of that color just so that the edges are colored. At this point, it almost gives the illusion of being a white banner being pulled. And those are just the shadows. Just simple coloring. It looks a little darker on screen than it does in person, but just enough to give the edges some color and dimension. And this C0 will finish off the blend. And once it dries back, it does look really nice, and it looks like a banner that's has the shadows cast from being blown in the wind. So now we're going to move on to the body of the plane, the fuselage, and we're going to use a 4-marker red blend using R22, R24, R29, and R59. The first marker I'm going to pull out is R22, and that's really the base coat. It is the highlight of the markers in the blend, and it's the lightest, and so I really want the entire fuselage colored this color, but for now I'm just getting myself visually able to look at the object and give it a cylindrical look. And to do that, you would need to go from the bottom towards the center, and you flick the color, leaving a highlight, a lighter highlight in the middle to achieve the perception. Your eyes are going to read it as a rounded object. And so that's what I'm doing when I'm flicking. And so we moved to the second marker, which was R24, and I wanted to make sure that we were putting the darker color underneath the wing and underneath the body of the airplane, because I thought of the sun casting the light from the top, so the darker colors would be coming from the bottom. And so that's why I'm flicking the R29 just from the bottom now, and I'm not going from the top down at this point, because I want the highlight to be at the top of the fuselage. And so we're just flicking. And if you had seen just before, red is a tricky color. It's hard to correct when you go outside the line. Mainly with a white gel pen, the colors will come out pink if you use a white pen to do corrections. So I did use some of the colorless blender to push the color that had bled outside the line. So again, these are just flicks now from the top, just to kind of blend that line of demarcation between the darkest and the lightest markers. Reds can be difficult to blend. You just have to continue to go over with them. Some of them tend to bleach each other out. They have a little more of the zero colorless blender as part of their makeup, and so they do tend to bleach out some of the darker reds. So it just takes a little patience and some additional layers, but eventually I'm able to get this blended out so that it did look like a dimensional rounded object. And now I'm going and finishing up any of the areas that look like they could use a little extra coat with R22. Still working on that final blend between the darkest and the lightest. Now the wing, I believe, will be something that people may either choose to do a solid wing. For my project, I wanted to do something that looked kind of customized for the holiday. And so it's kind of a drip, a paint drip looking, I don't know if you want to call it a slime, that you might see on a stencil for Halloween or just dripping icing. But this is something that I just figured I could show how you can do it easily by drawing dots first, like little dots in different levels, and then we go back with the lightest of the markers in the blend and connect them together so they're drips. At this point, you can't tell if it's white dripping down or the red dripping up, but I wanted it to look like the red paint was coming from the top of the wing and going down, dripping down against the force of wind. So it really is supposed to look like the red is dripping up, I guess, is the best way to describe it. But I left it so that you could just kind of watch the process and see how I did that. I will do some added touches on the drips with some white gel pen, and I only use, I believe, 3 of the colors from the red blend and not all 4, but I may have snuck them all in there at one point. But the darker color, the red, I believe it is R59, it really does make a big difference in providing like a depth of the drop and to give it like a 3D look in person. So on here, I'm just filling in and trying to get some of the blend. It is fairly small, and it does tend to bleed the more I add ink. So I didn't want them to bleed into each other. So I'm carefully adding layers as I go along. And there, I did get all 4 on those. Probably not very much of that R59, but just enough to give it added depth. And once this is done, I will show you how to incorporate some hearts in the white space to really give that feeling of Valentine's. Here I am going back again. Sometimes there's a need to go back because reds are just sometimes hard to blend. If you don't have all of the colors and you need to compensate for not having a certain range of colors, you can do a technique called tip to tip that can sometimes be helpful in making your blends smoother. Now to do these hearts, I'm actually making very small V's, the letter V, and then I go in with the colors and I just blend it out just a little bit at the top, and it gives it the illusion of being a heart. So I was able to put several of them on there, and not sure if it looks more like a yummy dessert, but I wanted it to be fun and festive, and so I hope you come up with some fancy wing design that you enjoy as much as I did this one. So we are almost, it looks like almost halfway through, but I wanted to add a final dark highlight to the hearts. And then because white is not always just a stark piece of white paper, we want to give it dimension. We want to give it some, not, white objects really are not truly solid white. They have grays and different levels of pigment. And so I am going to pull some of the N1, I believe, and possibly the CO to color it in at the end. I guess I haven't done it yet, but we're going to use the R22 on the rudder and then add a little R24 to give it some depth and dimension from that one end. And then R29. Just going from the part that's touching the end of the plane and then to the curve. We're trying to give it a look of being a rounded object, something with dimension. And so we want to have some highlight as well as some darker shadows. And if we get it right, it should look like a dimensional object when you are standing far enough away from it to be able to look at it and trick your eyes just a little bit. Okay, this is going to be a scary one for some of you. This is called underpainting, and it's throwing in that BG15 along with those E's. I'm actually trying to create the look of weathered leather. I thought that this little girl should have a hot pink helmet and be all Valentine's, but Louis, my husband, thought it would be a good idea to keep her the classic pilot with the weathered leather bomber jacket and helmet. So I took his advice and I tried to create the look of weathered leather on her pilot's outfit or uniform. and then make the plane more cutesy rather than her attire. So I hope you like it. And so what you will see is I am using the BG15 as shadow, where you would expect your shadows, or where you want the darker, more weathered look. So I've gone and mapped all of that out with the BG15, and then I'm moving on to the E15. And just like we did earlier, we want two colors to be on directly on top of one another. In skin, we were doing it with the E04 and E11. And now we're going to be doing it with the underpainting. The BG15 and the E15 will lay on top of each other, and not that the E15 cancels it out, but it does change the color of, it's no longer a blue that looks out of place. It is now changing the complete makeup of the E15 and giving it a totally different look, because alcohol markers are able to be layered and sometimes you can see through them, and they blend so well. When you have that contrasting color underneath, I've seen the purples used that way, and this was something new to me that I did a little research on, and what to use as underpainting for things like this. So I hope you take a chance and try this underpainting. You'll be surprised. You wouldn't know that it was blue by the time you're done. It does give it a nice weathered look, and I look forward to finding other opportunities to try underpainting. Okay, so we are working with E15, and we are going up and down the sides of the helmet, coloring in any of the remaining white space that was visible, I guess. And now the darker of the E's in this blend, the E18, will be added to the edges closest to her hairline, where you would expect your finger oils and other things to be touching, maybe causing that leather to be darkened in that particular area, where she would be sliding her glasses or her goggles on and off on top of her head. The oils from her hands would be on it. And I was just trying to think of different places where one would expect maybe the leather to be worn some. So that is my lesson on underpainting at this time. It helps to enhance and darken some of your shadows and gives it a whole new look. While I had the BG15 out, I used it to create the weathered look on goggles, but you will also notice that it is used in the lenses of the goggles as well, because I figured that it would serve as a reflection of the blue in the clouds that would maybe be reflecting off of her goggles as she was flying. So we've colored the BG 15 around the goggles, the E15 on top of the underpainting of the BG 15, which turned it to a different shade of brown, like a green brown, and then finishing off the darkest of our shadows with the E18. And then I go in with my N4 and I map out the goggles. I guess I frame out the goggles with the darkest of the ends that are used on this project, N4, and that gives it the curve. Then I do some light flicks with the N1 to kind of blend in some of that N4, and there's where the underpainting comes in. I don't consider this part underpainting more than I do just the use of the blue as a reflective color to insinuate some of the reflection we might expect to see from a very vibrant blue sky. And we can't forget to color her tongue. It's just a little bit of R43, and then towards the back, a little bit, very light touch of the R89, and that should do it. We're pulling out the same blend that we did our helmet in, because, of course, this little girl has to have a matching set. She has her bomber jacket and her helmet, and they're all going to coordinate together with the same colors. BG 15, we're starting off and doing underpainting on top. We're hitting her shoulder, giving it a little curve there. We're going to hit underneath where her sleeve would be overlapping her top, where the shirt touches the inside of the plane. Anything that's laying on top of or touching, I'm using that underpainting. And then I believe I went straight to E18, and we're putting in the darkest highlights. Again, anything that's touching something or laying on top of would cast a shadow, or we would expect to cast a shadow. So we want to make sure that we're taking the time to put those darkest points of contact in. And then now to the E15, we're going to be going from the darkest part and flicking out and blending it all out. Okay. Starting to look good. Almost done. And we've moved on to the YR24, I believe, at this point. And we are coloring in and blending all of those layers together, still leaving a highlight for us to use our last marker, the YR21, to finish that off and blend it all together. So now we have a perfect matching set, bomber jacket and her cute little helmet. We're just going to finish with the flicking, kind of putting in some of the highlights that may have been faded or bleached out with the lighter colors that we were layering on top. And we finish with the last marker, and we can call her bomber jacket complete. I realized I hadn't done her glove and the inside of the fuselage, and rather than add any new colors to our palette, I just grabbed the end markers and the CO. I also, at this point, realized that I needed to color in the white of the wing, and I also flashed some of the Copic opaque white in the nail polish bottle. That is just a really neat way to add white details and highlights to your projects and elevate them. So I spend a little bit of time adding little special touches with this white liquid. It's almost like whiteout, and it comes in a nail polish size bottle with a brush built in, and it does tend to drip, so you have to be really careful and watch for drips, and make sure that you're checking any of the liquid runoff before it drops on your project, so you have to be real careful. But if you do utilize it, it does add some really beautiful highlights, and it does not pull up the colors like red. Sometimes a gel pen will pull up some of the pigment from red alcohol marker, and then your line is not a bright white, it's more of a pink. So this has taken that away. You'll see I'm actually placing some stripes across the lenses of the goggles to give a reflective look as well. And then across the propeller hub, and also on the propellers. And I believe I also will do the dots in her eyes, and also on the banner. We're getting to the home stretch, and we'll be able to cut her out and put her in a project. There I am using it as a way of cleaning up messes of any ink that may have gotten out of the lines. So now we're doing something called fussy cutting. Some of you might have cutting machines that will allow you to use your, like a Brother Scan and Cut or Cricut or other electronic die cutting machine. I did not have that opportunity, so I did some fussy cutting, and I like fussy cutting, but I sped it up a little bit to show you that I was able to fussy cut it out. And we are going to work on our cloud background using a cloud builder stencil. And what I've done is I've used some Distress Oxide inks and some blending brushes, and the layering cloud builder stencil from Stamp Anything. It contains several layers of cloud stencils that can be mixed and matched. You could actually use just one of them and get several different looks without ever needing to dirty the other ones. But this is such an amazing design, and you actually get I believe there are 4 different strips, and you can flip them over and get several different looks. And I'm trying to go for a pinky lavender blue sky, and using a variety of different inks and blending brushes specifically for my Distress Oxides, because they are a more pigmenty ink, and I don't want to mix my brushes that are used for the hybrid inks that Stamp Anything has, that I also could have used for ink blending, but I wanted a more soft and subtle look. I could have achieved it with the hybrid inks that and offers in some of the lighter colors, but I find that blending with the distress inks is very therapeutic because it's very, very easy to correct mistakes, and the distress oxides are a forgiving ink, and I hadn't used them in a while. So if I had to go by the rule, if you've used it in a year, if you haven't, you had to get rid of it. Those are the items that I am focusing on making sure, if they're in my craft room, that I can say I haven't used it in a year, but I have now, so I'm good. It's good for another year. Anyway, I wanted to show you and feature some of the spritz that is offered at Stamp Anything. I sprayed it on there. Love the glitz and color that you get when you add and elevate your stencils with things like that. Okay, so we have our background clouds done. Now I've cut all my pieces for my card base. You have an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. You're just going to cut it straight down the middle, portrait, and that'll give you the base of the card, which is going to be 4.25 by 11. There's where I'm showing you that it's actually just a piece of 8.5 by 11 cardstock cut down the middle. Now I'm going to score it at 2.75 and 5.5. So basically I'm making, if you score it at 5.5, it's really an A2 card base. But now I'm also going to score it at 2.75. Okay? And then we're going to fold those down and use our bone folder or your fingernail or whatever you do. No fancy tools are necessary, but this way you actually have some nice folds and crisp folds if you use some kind of crease tool. So that's what I'm doing here. I have again cut a piece of 8.5 by 11 in half, portrait, long ways, making an A2 size card base because it's scored at 5.5. And then I'm also scoring it again at 2.75, which is actually in half. And that will give us a fancy fold base for this card project. With our piece colored up and cut, we're now ready to put our card together. We have our red card base, which is 4.25 by 11 and scored at 2.75 and 5.5. Then I had cut 2 white panels, 5.25 by 4. One was used for the clouds with the stencil, and the other has glue put on it and is being placed inside the card so that you have a nice clean space to write a note to your recipient. So now all we have left to do is the stacking of the 4 panels. There's the red 5.5 by 4.25 base with a piece of red glittered cardstock, as you can see here, that's having glue put on to be matted on a piece of regular white cardstock with an 1/8 of an inch border around it, very small, just enough to separate the two reds, the red base and the red glitter cardstock. I just wanted there to be some type of separation, so it was just an idea to just cut easily an 1/8 of an inch border around. And then the panel of the clouds that we stenciled go on top of the red cardstock to kind of frame the scene on the front of the card with some pop of glitter. You can never go wrong with glitter, so I wanted that. And then this is a very important step. you're going to want to make sure that when you apply the glue to the front of the card base, the one that has the scored line, we do not want glue on the left side. So when the card is going to open, you want to be able to put, you're going to now measure the edges and along the side and line them up so that the card base lays exactly on top of that panel, where you only put glue down the one side so that left the top not attached to the front by glue. And that allows it to open and slide open like an easel card. You can have it stand up on your desk or mantle or whatever, and it could be put in a nice place for someone to display. I use the Paris Builder die on the inside of the card. I used the Cloud Builder stencil for the panel, and I used Annie's glue tube to adhere. I have created a Copic recipe card that features all the colors, and this is the final project, and I certainly hope you enjoy it. When you open it up, that ooh la la Paris is just the cutest scene. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this color along with me. Have a wonderful day.